She was burying the pup alone in the snow. The Lycan king stopped everything to dig with her. The snow had been falling since before dawn, slow and heavy, as if the sky itself was tired. It covered the northern lands in silence, softening sharp stones and hiding old tracks. In this world of wolves and crowns, winter was not only a season, it was a warning. She knelt alone at the edge of the forest. Her cloak was thin, torn at the hem and soaked through with cold. Snow clung to her dark hair and melted against her skin, but she did not wipe it away. Her hands were buried in the frozen ground, digging with bare fingers. Each movement hurt, but she did not stop. She had no shovel, no help, no name that mattered. Beside her lay the small, still body of a pup wrapped in cloth. Its fur was white with gray spots, its eyes closed as if sleeping. It had followed her everywhere, it had trusted her, and now it was gone. She swallowed hard, her breath shaking. "Just a little longer," she whispered, though no one could hear her. "I promise." The ground was stiff with ice. Every time her fingers struck stone, pain shot up her arms. Blood stained the snow, bright and cruel against the white. Still, she dug. In the Lycan realm, pups without lineage were often ignored. Omegas without protection were forgotten. And grief like hers had no place in the great halls of kings. The wind rose, carrying the distant sound of horns. She froze. No one came this far into the forest unless summoned or hunted. The horns were deep and powerful, echoing across the land. A royal signal. Fear slid into her chest like cold water. She bent lower over the small body, shielding it as if she could protect it even now. Her shoulders trembled, not only from cold but from memory, from all the times she had been pushed aside, from all the losses she had swallowed without sound. Footsteps approached, heavy, steady, unafraid of the storm. She did not look up. A shadow fell across the snow, tall and unmoving. The air around it felt different, thicker, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The Lycan king had arrived. He was known across the realm by many names. Some called him the Winter Crown, others called him the Ice Lord. To most, he was a ruler carved from stone, silent, distant, untouchable. He stood at the edge of the clearing, his dark cloak stirring in the wind. Snow did not cling to him. It bent away as if unwilling to settle. Behind him, guards waited, tense and confused. This was not on any path. No meeting had been planned here. The king's sharp eyes were fixed on the kneeling figure. An Omega, alone, bleeding, burying a pup. Something tightened in his chest. He could not remember the last time he had seen something so small, so quiet, yet so heavy with meaning. The world slowed. The horns fell silent. Even the wind softened. The Omega finally sensed him. Slowly she lifted her head. Her face was pale from cold and grief. Her eyes were red, not from tears, she had cried them all away, but from the weight of holding everything inside. When her gaze met his, she stiffened. She recognized him instantly. Everyone did. Her hands shook. She pulled them back from the earth and bowed her head deeply, pressing her forehead to the snow. "My king," she said, her voice barely audible. "Forgive me. I did not mean to be seen." She waited for anger, for command, for punishment. None came. The Lycan king took one step forward, then another. The crunch of snow under his boots echoed louder than it should have. The guards shifted uneasily. This was not how things went. Kings did not approach grief. They did not step into it. He stopped beside her. His gaze moved to the small wrapped form on the ground. Something old stirred behind his eyes, something buried long ago under duty and law. "What happened?" he asked. His voice was deep, calm, but not cruel. She hesitated. Omegas were taught not to speak unless spoken to again, but something in his tone allowed truth. "He was weak," she said softly. "The pack would not take him. I tried to keep him warm. I tried everything." Her voice cracked. "But winter does not listen." The king said nothing. The silence stretched. Snow continued to fall. Slowly, the Lycan king removed his gloves. A sharp breath went through the guards. His hands were marked with old scars, signs of battles, of decisions made in blood and stone. Those hands had held swords, seals, and crowns. He knelt. The sound was small, but it felt like thunder. The king of the Lycans knelt in the snow beside an unclaimed Omega. Without a word, he placed his bare hands into the frozen ground and began to dig. The Omega stared, frozen in shock. "My king, please, you do not have to." He did not look at her. He continued digging, his movements steady and sure. The earth cracked more easily under his touch, as if it recognized him. "No one should bury the dead alone," he said. Her breath caught. Tears burned her eyes, but she forced them back. She had learned long ago that tears did not save anyone. Still, something inside her broke open. She joined him. Together they dug. The snow fell thicker, but around them something strange happened. The ground beneath their hands grew softer. The bitter wind eased. The cold loosened its grip. Far away, deep within the ancient stones of the castle, something old stirred. The hole was finished at last. Carefully she placed the pup inside. Her hands lingered on the cloth, smoothing it one final time. Her lips moved, whispering words from an old song her mother had once sung, a song for safe journeys and gentle endings. The king listened. When the grave was filled, he stood and removed the dark pin from his cloak. He placed it into the snow at the head of the grave, a royal mark. Gasps rose from the guards. Royal rights were never given to the unclaimed. "This one is remembered," the king said. "Let the earth keep him kindly." The Omega bowed her head, her shoulders shaking. She did not thank him. Gratitude felt too small for what had been given. As the king turned to leave, a strange warmth spread through the clearing. The snow closest to the grave began to melt, not enough to flood, not enough to alarm, just enough to be noticed. The king paused. He looked back at the Omega, who was staring at the ground in disbelief. Snow did not melt in the Lycan realm, not in winter, not for anyone. His jaw tightened. Something had changed. High above them, unseen eyes opened in the dark. And far beyond the forest, ancient forces began to whisper a name the king had not heard spoken in 100 years. The forest seemed quieter than usual after that day. Snow still fell, but it fell differently, softer, slower, almost like it was listening. The Omega did not know why, but she felt a strange weight pressing at her chest. The touch of the Lycan king's hands in the frozen ground had left something behind, something she could not name. She returned to her small shelter, hidden beneath the pines, but sleep did not come. Every sound of cracking ice and falling snow felt louder than before. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward her. She knew that the king's arrival was not a random act. In the Lycan realm, nothing was random. The next morning a messenger came, riding a black wolf that moved like a shadow. He bore a sealed letter with the mark of the king himself. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "You are to come to the castle, not as a servant, not as a prisoner, come as a guest." "The king wishes to speak." She stared at the words. A guest. That was a word she had never been called. She had always been invisible to the world, ignored, dismissed, pushed aside. And now the king himself invited her into the heart of power, into the halls she had only heard of in whispers and fears. She thought of the pup, buried in the snow. She thought of the king kneeling beside her, and she made a choice. When she arrived at the castle, the walls seemed taller than the tallest pines, their black stone glinting with frost. The air carried power, old magic, and law. Guards stood at every entrance, their eyes sharp and wary. But when they saw her, they did not move to stop her. They only looked at her with surprise and then away, as if afraid to meet her gaze. The Lycan king awaited her in the main hall. The room was vast, cold, and empty of warmth, yet somehow it felt less threatening than the forest had. He did not rise when she entered. His eyes, sharp and silver like storm clouds, watched her with quiet intensity. "You came," he said simply. She bowed her head. "I received your message, my king." He studied her silently. Then, without another word, he gestured to a seat. "Sit." She obeyed, though every instinct in her body screamed caution. Sitting across from a king was not the same as speaking to a man. Kings held power in every breath, every movement, every glance. But this king, he seemed different. "Why did you kneel with me?" she asked finally. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly in her lap. The king's eyes darkened. "Because no one should be left alone in grief, not even a stranger, not even a pup." His words were simple but heavy. He paused and his gaze shifted to a window overlooking the snowy fields. "Long ago I was cursed. I chose power over mercy and the spirits bound my heart. Since then I have ruled alone." The Omega listened, unsure of what to say. The king, so feared across the lands, had spoken of loss. He had spoken of weakness. And yet here he was, kneeling in the snow with her. You feel it too," she whispered. He turned to her, eyes piercing. "I do, every day. And yet I have kept the law, kept the throne. Until now." A strange silence filled the hall. The sound of her own heartbeat seemed deafening. She did not know what the curse truly was, only that it had hardened him, made him unyielding, and kept everyone at a distance. And yet somehow she had touched something inside him that no one else had. "Why me?" she asked, almost in disbelief. "Why not another?" He looked at her with something close to sorrow. "Because you see what others cannot. You grieve, yes, but you do not bow to fear. You do not let the world crush you. You live despite it." The words sank deep into her chest. She had spent years invisible, unheard, unwanted. And this king, feared by all, had chosen to kneel in the snow with her to honor her grief. She did not know how to respond. "Many will not understand," he said, his voice dropping lower, almost to himself. "The council will oppose this. The spirits will rise. The pack may never forgive." She felt a tremor of fear. To be close to him was to stand against centuries of law, tradition, and power. And yet a strange warmth coursed through her. She had never felt seen, never felt that her pain mattered. And now somehow it did. Days passed and the king observed her quietly. She wandered the castle grounds, spoke gently to the animals, and tended to the few forgotten corners where frost and shadow had claimed dominion. Wherever she went, frost softened. Even the cold stone walls seemed less severe. The king found himself drawn to her in ways he had not known were possible. He watched her speak to a small fox trapped in the snow, her voice gentle, coaxing. He saw her feed a bird whose wing was broken, whispering words of care. He saw her kneel to clear ice from a frozen stream, her movements patient, unhurried. And he realized something dangerous. His heart, long frozen by law and curse, was thawing. The curse fought back. Storms raged beyond the borders of the castle. The spirits whispered in the wind. Shadows moved in the halls where no one should tread. The council of the king's advisors murmured dark warnings. "She is not of noble blood. She is unclaimed. She will bring ruin." But the king did not care. Until one night a shadow slipped past the guards. A figure entered the chambers where she slept, silent as frost. He was faster, stronger, and when he caught the intruder, he recognized the threat immediately. The king's fury was like lightning, precise and deadly. The intruder fled into the night, but the danger lingered. The Omega, awakened by the commotion, looked at him with wide eyes. "You saved me," she whispered. He did not answer immediately. He only stared at her, and for the first time he felt the weight of choice pressing down. Protect her and risk everything. Step back and let the law decide and perhaps doom both of them. "I will not let harm come to you," he said finally. His voice was quiet but firm, even if the world would demand it. The Omega's lips trembled. She wanted to speak, to tell him it was enough, it was too much, but she could not. The truth of his words sank into her like fire into ice. Days turned into nights, and nights brought dreams, strange, vivid, and haunting. The king dreamed of the past, of a throne built on cruelty, of decisions that had cost lives, of moments where he had chosen power over compassion. And in each dream she appeared, her face calm, her hands gentle, her presence a light he could not reach. When he awoke, he found her sitting outside his chamber, waiting. Snow had fallen quietly around her. She had not moved, she had not left. "You appear in my dreams," he said softly, "and yet I see you here." She looked up, eyes calm. "Perhaps some things are meant to find you," she said. He could not speak. He only stared. The curse, deep and ancient, seemed to quiver, sensing the shift in his heart. And then, as if the realm itself demanded his attention, a roar echoed from the mountains beyond. The council's messengers arrived, pale and urgent. "Your Majesty," they said, voice trembling, "the spirits have stirred, the frost has broken, they sense a change." The king's jaw tightened. He knew exactly what had caused it, her. She had not meant to. She had only grieved, only cared, only lived, and yet in doing so she had broken something centuries old. The king turned to her, silver eyes soft but unwavering. "The spirits will come for us," he said. "They will demand sacrifice. They will test us, both of us." The Omega's heart skipped. "Then we face them together," she said. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time he felt fear, not for himself but for her. Something stirred in the sky above the castle. A shadow, immense and dark, moved across the snow. The wind screamed with voices older than time, warning, threatening. The curse was awake, and in the deepest part of the king's mind he knew this was only the beginning. The castle had never been so quiet, yet never so tense. Snow fell against the black stone walls, blanketing the world outside in white, softening every sound but amplifying every shadow. Inside, the air was heavy, charged with an unspoken tension. The Omega walked the halls slowly, her hands brushing the cold stone as if she could feel the castle's heartbeat beneath the walls. Every corner, every window, every shadow seemed to watch her. She knew the council whispered about her. She had seen the advisor's eyes flicker with fear or disdain. They did not understand her, nor the strange change she had brought to the Lycan king. And yet, she did not falter. The king observed her from the balcony above the main hall, his silver eyes distant but unblinking. He had never taken his gaze from her, not even for a moment since that day in the snow when they had buried the pup together. She did not notice him. She did not need to. The servants moved quietly, avoiding her. She had no title, no noble birth, yet she walked through the castle as though it belonged to her. And in a way it did, not by law, not by crown, but because she had touched something long thought dead inside the king. Compassion, care, and perhaps even love. The king stepped down from the balcony silently, landing near her with the softest crunch of snow against stone. She froze instinctively but did not turn. She had learned something about him. He never announced himself, he simply arrived. And yet she felt safe in his presence in a way she had never felt before. "You speak to the animals as if they understand you," he said, his voice quiet, deep. "I listen," she replied softly, "and they listen to me." He nodded slowly. "I have never seen that in another. Not even among my advisors, not even among my kin." She finally turned, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, the world narrowed to the two of them. Snowflakes drifted between them like tiny stars, each one catching the faint light from the torches. "Do they trust you because you are kind?" he asked. "No," she said. "They trust me because I am like them, alone, forgotten, but I try to protect them." He did not speak for a long moment. His mind was crowded with the warnings of spirits, the murmurs of the council, and the memories of his cursed heart. Yet standing before him was someone who had never asked for power, who had never demanded obedience, and who had made him feel something he thought impossible: warmth. The king made a decision then, one that could undo centuries of law. "You will stay in the castle," he said. "With me, not as a servant, not as a prisoner, as a guest." Her heart skipped. I cannot," she said quickly. "The council, they will protest," he interrupted. "They will not understand, but they will not stop me." Days passed. She began to move freely through the castle, learning its hidden corridors, discovering its forgotten rooms, and speaking gently to the animals that roamed its courtyards. And wherever she went, the frost seemed to retreat. Even the ancient statues, once coated in thick ice, seemed to soften. The king watched her quietly, sometimes from a distance, sometimes silently beside her. He had not knelt for another in decades, and yet around her he felt the old habit returning, not as ruler but as someone who cared. One night, as the snow fell heavier than usual, the king found her at the castle's edge, staring at the frozen lake. The moon reflected on the ice like silver glass. "You walk into danger," he said quietly. "I am not afraid," she said, not turning. "I have survived worse." He stepped closer, feeling the pull of something older than the castle itself, older than any law or curse. "You do not understand," he said. "The spirits, they are watching. They will not ignore you." She finally looked at him, eyes steady. "Let them come. I will face them if I must." He saw her courage, her resolve, and he felt a pang of fear deeper than any battle he had ever fought, because her defiance was not reckless. It was born of truth, and she had already changed him in ways he could not undo. The next morning the council arrived, their faces pale with anger and fear. "Your Majesty," the eldest advisor said, voice trembling, this is dangerous. She is unclaimed. She is not of the bloodline. The spirits will punish you. The packs will rebel. You cannot." "I can," the king interrupted, his voice cutting like steel. "I will. She is under my protection." Whispers filled the hall. Some licked the walls like frost. Others trembled like living shadows. The Omega did not flinch. She had long ago learned to walk among whispers and eyes. But even she felt the weight of the king's words. In the days that followed, the spirits stirred. Storms rose over the mountains, fierce winds howled through the forests, and the northern lights flickered in strange, unnatural patterns. Even the castle walls seemed to hum with magic, as though the curse itself was awake and watching. The king and the Omega spent hours together, walking the halls, speaking in soft voices, tending to animals, and exploring hidden corners of the castle. Their bond deepened, silent at first, then gradually through small gestures, an offered hand, a shared look, a quiet word in the dark. Yet danger was never far. One night, shadows slipped past the guards and crept into the chambers where she slept. The king moved faster than any shadow could predict. In a blur, he intercepted the intruders, his movements precise and lethal in silence. The attackers fled, leaving only a warning in their wake. The Omega awoke in fright, only to find him standing outside her door, his silver eyes soft but alert. "You are not safe," he said, "not even here." "I am not afraid," she said, rising to meet him. "Not while you are near." His chest tightened. For the first time he felt fear not for himself, but for her. Her bravery, her presence, her very being had awakened something ancient in him. The king realized then that the curse, which had bound his heart in ice for so long, was shifting. Every moment with her thawed it just a little, but the spirits would not forgive. They would come for her, and perhaps for him too. Days turned into nights, and nights brought dreams. The king dreamed of his past, the throne he had claimed, the battles he had fought, the mercy he had denied. And in every dream she appeared. She walked through his memories, calm and gentle, untouched by fear, untouched by the weight of his crown. When he awoke, he found her waiting for him again, as if she had known he would need her. Snow fell quietly around her, blanketing the courtyard in silver. "You appear in my dreams," he said softly, his voice unsteady for the first time. "And yet I see you here." "Perhaps some things are meant to find you," she said, her eyes calm, steady, unflinching. And he knew, with a certainty that terrified him, that she was the key to something he had long thought impossible: redemption. But the world would not allow it to come easily. Far beyond the castle walls in the northern mountains, the winds howled with voices older than memory. The spirits were awake. They had sensed the bond forming between them, and they would test it, in ways neither the king nor the Omega could imagine. As they stood together in the snow, the king realized the truth. The choice he had made, to protect her, to defy the law, to embrace the warmth she brought, would demand a price. A high price. And the first storm was coming. The storm had arrived. Snow whipped across the northern lands, turning the world outside the castle into a blur of white. The winds carried voices older than memory, warning, whispering, and demanding. Even the Lycan king had never heard such sound. The air hummed with magic, thick and heavy, pressing against every stone of the castle. The king stood at the highest balcony, his silver eyes scanning the horizon. The mountains beyond were jagged, black shadows under the storm, and deep within them he could sense the spirits gathering. They had come for the Omega who had softened his frozen heart. He turned toward the hall where she waited. She stood calmly, her dark hair whipping in the wind, her cloak wrapped tightly around her. Her eyes met his, steady and unafraid. Despite the cold, despite the storm, she radiated a warmth that the castle had not known in centuries. "You will not leave me to face this alone," the king said, his voice low but firm. "I never would," she replied. "We face it together." The king's jaw tightened. This was no ordinary battle. These were spirits older than the castle, older than any law he had ever known. They demanded the price of his defiance, his throne, perhaps even his life, but he would not let them take her. Not her. Not now. The storm struck first as a blinding white wind, moving through the castle corridors like a living thing. The doors rattled on their hinges. Windows shook. Guards and advisors rushed to hold the castle together, but even they felt powerless. The king drew his sword, its silver edge glinting against the snow, and went to her side. "You must stay close," he said, and she nodded. She did not flinch as the wind tore at the walls because she trusted him, and he would give everything to protect her. The spirits tested them first with illusions. Shadows of the past, twisted and cruel, appeared in the hallways. The king saw visions of himself failing, of battles lost, of people he had loved dying because of his choices. The Omega saw her own fears reflected back: loneliness, abandonment, loss of everything she had held dear. But they stood together, unshaken. The king reached for her hand and she took it. The touch of their hands, simple and human, created a small spark against the storm, a light in the darkness. And the storm recoiled slightly, as if it had not expected to find such strength in them. The spirits grew bolder. Their voices became shrill, commanding the king to surrender, to hand her over, to give up the bond he had chosen. The walls themselves trembled and frost spread rapidly across the floors, threatening to trap them in ice. "Hold my hand," the king commanded. "Trust me and trust yourself." The Omega squeezed his hand, and together they walked forward, facing the illusions and the voices. Their bond, forged in grief, trust, and courage, became a shield. Every time the spirits tried to separate them, their hands held stronger, their hearts beating in rhythm against the ancient magic that sought to destroy them. Then the king stepped forward, raising his sword high. Its silver edge reflected the storm outside. He shouted, his voice carrying authority older than the castle itself. "I will not kneel to fear. I will not bow to old law. I choose her, and I choose mercy." The castle shook as the words resonated through the stone. A blinding light filled the hall, snow and frost melting instantly around them. The storm, furious at first, faltered. The whispers of the spirits became hesitant, uncertain. The king turned to her. "Stand with me. Together we end this." She stepped forward without hesitation. Her voice, clear and strong, joined his. "We are not afraid, we will not bow. Love and courage are stronger than fear." The light from their hearts, simple, human, yet impossible to ignore, spread through the castle. The walls glowed, the frost melted. The spirits recoiled, hissing and fading, unable to break the bond that had been forged through loss, empathy, and trust. The storm broke. The snow fell softly now, gentle as a lullaby. Outside, the northern lands were quiet. Even the mountains seemed to pause, as if acknowledging the change. The king lowered his sword, exhausted but unbroken. He looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time in decades he felt free from the weight of the curse. You changed everything," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "No," she said softly. We changed it together." He reached for her hand again, holding it firmly, gently, as though letting go could undo everything. "You have saved me. Not from them, not from the curse, but from myself, from the ice I had built around my heart." She smiled, a faint, quiet smile that seemed to carry the warmth of sunlight into the frozen castle. "And you saved me," she whispered, "by letting me stay, by letting me exist, by letting me matter." The king knelt in the snow once more, but this time not in sorrow, not in grief. He knelt in vow. He pressed a silver mark into the ground, a symbol of protection, of life, and of choice. "This castle, this throne, this kingdom, it will no longer be ruled by fear," he said. "It will be ruled by mercy, by courage, by love." Together they walked to the place where the pup had been buried months ago. Flowers bloomed through the snow, delicate and resilient. The king knelt beside her and planted another marker, this one of life, of memory, and of hope. The castle, once cold and silent, seemed to breathe again. Frost melted from the walls, ice from the windows, and warmth from the king's heart spread through every stone. Guards, servants, and advisors watched in awe. They had feared change, feared her, feared the bond between an Omega and a king. And yet they saw the impossible, the kingdom alive again, transformed not by conquest or power but by courage and love. The king turned to her, kneeling beside her in the soft snow. "The world will not forgive this easily," he said. "Let it not forgive us," she replied, "if it cannot see the truth. We know it. We survived it. We are stronger because of it." He took her hand, lifting it to his lips, a silent promise. "Then we face everything together." And far beyond the castle walls, where the spirits had once whispered threats, silence fell. The curse had been broken. Not by force, not by blood, but by the choice of two hearts willing to defy the old rules, to trust, to protect, and to love. The northern lights flickered across the sky, brighter than ever, reflecting on the snow like a river of colors. Wolves howled in the distance, a celebration, a warning, and a song all at once. The realm itself seemed alive again, healed and watching. The king and the Omega walked back into the castle together, side by side. The frost had melted from the floors. Warmth filled the hallways. And for the first time, the Lycan king did not feel alone. He had found redemption. She had found a home. And together they had remade a kingdom in mercy, in courage, and in love. The pup's grave, once a place of sorrow, had become a symbol of hope. Life and warmth had returned to the frozen lands. And the king, whose heart had been bound in ice for centuries, now knew that true power was not in ruling, not in fear and not in crowns, but in kneeling to protect and rising to love. But beyond the mountains, far in the dark corners of the realm, something ancient still watched. The storm had passed, but the world of spirits, kings, and curses was vast. And though the king and the Omega had won this battle, the realm whispered that their journey had only just begun. The king pressed his forehead gently to hers. "Whatever comes," he said softly, "we face it together." She smiled, resting her hand on his chest. "Always," she said. And for a moment, in the castle surrounded by snow and light, nothing else mattered. The frost was gone, the spirits had been challenged, and the hearts of two unlikely companions had forged a new legend, one that would be remembered long after the winter passed.